welcome to another episode of Rethinking Freedom. We're excited to have our listening audience and our audience that also watches us on YouTube, or if you are catching us on any of the podcast platforms. Thank you so much for all your support. It's been a whirlwind these last 2 months, and we're excited about the growth and your comments. We'd really love to read your comments. So when you watch this show, we know you'll have a lot to say, and we definitely want to hear from you. My name is Aya Fubaranelli, and I am your host. And with me today, I have as always, two amazing, absolutely fantastic guests, and I'm going to introduce them in a minute. But today, I want to talk a little bit about what this show is about. It is December 30th. It's almost the end of 2024. And some of you may already be thinking about what this year has been for you, what you're hoping for in 2025. Maybe you're excited. Maybe there's a little trepidation. I would say first and foremost that it's really important that we focus on the fact that we have life, because there are many people who did not get to the end of this year. There are some people who will not see the beginning of the next year. So as long as we have breath in us, that should be the starting point. That should be the place where we just pause for a minute, whatever the anxiety might be out there, and just say, I am grateful for this breath. Our conversation today is going to center on she lived her purpose and changed the world. Why knowing your purpose changes everything. And, in over 30 years of coaching women, so often when I talk to women and people in general, what is your purpose? It's like you've asked this question that is harder than geometry and Latin and everything else combined. It's one of the reasons why Rick Warren's book, The Purpose Lived Life, sold millions of copies across the world, because people are like, yeah, what is my purpose? And particularly as you start to get up in age, you start to get into your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, you're definitely getting to a place where you're saying, am I living my purpose? So I know you are going to be very interested in this topic that we have today. There are basically two types of people in the world. There are people who wake up in the morning with energy and clarity, and they're ready to embrace the day. They don't call the clock that might wake them up an alarm clock. They call it an opportunity clock, like Zig Ziglar used to say. They are excited. They have a list of things. In fact, they have to calm themselves down, not to immediately jump into things, but to make sure they're centering themselves before they just get going, right? But then there are other people who wake up and they don't want to get up. They may hit that snooze button 3, 4, 5 times. I'm not judging anybody. Please don't hear that as it, here, this is that. But they're feeling burdened, very unmotivated. They're uninspired. They're lost. They may feel trapped. They may feel stuck. And it's like, is this all there is to life? What am I even getting up for? And life has just become a series of just mundane acts. And they may look good on the outside. They may have a great job. They may have a nice house, drive a fancy car, have a nice looking spouse, or, children. But there's still this emptiness. They're going through the motions. And the question is, what is the difference? What is the difference? I believe I have come to feel on my end that the difference is purpose. That when you have purpose for your life, no matter what life throws at you, no matter how hard it gets, no matter the challenges, you are still connected to that purpose. You're still driven by that purpose, right? And so the reason we're having this conversation is, if you are not yet at a point where you're saying, I am clear on my purpose, I am clear on what it is I am here to do, then it's time to do that work to figure it out. Because once you figure it out, I'm not saying life becomes all sunshine and roses and all of that. As a matter of fact, the idea, the expectation that life should just be always easy gets us in trouble. Because every piece of success, you look at a plant, I love to garden. You look at a seed when it's planted, that seed has to go through some things, has to go through some work. If it's a mango seed, the outer husk has to deteriorate before the inner seed now has to, grow roots that go into that cold, damp, dark soil. And then the other shoot is like breaking through, and all of this effort to come out from through the earth and get to the sunlight. So the idea that your life is only great when you have no challenges, actually, that's not even a life that's going to allow you to live purposefully. I'm going to just say that to begin with. So some of us chase purpose and achievements. Some of us excel in schools, careers, family, accumulating wealth. These are all great. They're meaningful pursuits, but they're not purpose themselves. Some of us avoid the question of purpose altogether. We're thrill seekers. Where can I travel to? What other experience can I have? What else can I, smoke, imbibe, feel this, that, that? And it's like it's never enough.
Mm-hmm.
All these pleasures, excesses, experiences, and all of that, that's not purpose either.
Mm-hmm.
Deep down inside, we know those things don't last. That is why we've seen people at both spectrums, and they still are not happy. So how do we find purpose? Or maybe how does purpose find us? Well, we have two incredible guests who are going to help walk us through this journey. Introducing them in no particular order, Dr. Nicola Gardier, who is an action-oriented leader, an accomplished administrator with 19 years experience in public education. Now, you guys, where I live, I know we have a global audience, but where I live, teachers are burning out. So when someone says 19 years in public education, you just need to pause and understand what that means, right? She served as a secondary school principal in Falls County, currently on the district's leadership team in Killeen ISD, serving over 33,000. I think we're like over 40,000 students. She's a mother to two amazing young men and a grandmother of two. She was selected by Texas Association of Secondary School Principals as Outstanding Assistant Principal of the Year in 2021, because, I don't bring any guests who are not outstanding. And here's the truth. All of you are outstanding if you just embrace it. That's really what it is. The difference is embracing it, doing the work, right? She's known as a transformative speaker, trainer, and Amazon best-selling author of 3 books. She's the legislative advocate for educators through Texas Education Policy Institute, having 2 major bills signed into law in 2021. Nicola is a founding member of Central Texas Alliance of Black School Educators. She also serves on the state's election committee. I call her Dr. Gardier. That's who she is to me. She founded and currently serves as the executive director of Myers Gardier International Foundation, a nonprofit organization serving families globally. She's also a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. And this is just like the tip of the iceberg. She is a woman who, if you have her in your life as a friend, you are going to become better. Period.
Yeah.
She makes everything and everyone around her better. I know she has made my life better. She's enriched the lives of my children. She is always a breath of fresh air, a problem solver. I could go on, but I know y'all want to hear from them. The next guest I want to introduce is Dr. Kiana White. She's dedicated over 20 years to education, serving in roles ranging from early childhood educator to executive leadership. Her experience includes positions as secondary teacher, instructional coach, principal, college lecturer, and executive director of professional development and curriculum. As the founder of Ready, Collect, Lead, LLC, a leadership consulting company, Dr. White specializes in developing leaders to establish vision, inspire trust, and leverage talent to enhance relationships and outcomes. She holds a Doctor of Education in Organizational Leadership with an emphasis in effective schools from Grand Canyon University. And let me tell you how dynamic this woman is as well. We lived in one community, and I went to a school where she happened to be the principal at the school. After a brief conversation with her, I left the free education that we could have had in one community, and we paid money and drove our kids every day to the school where she was a principal, because it was so important to me that my daughters got to see a woman of her caliber and character and level of excellence in their schools, to know what was possible for them. And I want to tell both of you, because you have been mentors to my daughters, those little girls are doing you all proud.
Oh,
They
for
are
sure.
there,
Yeah.
and it takes a village. It absolutely takes a village. You want your children to be around people who are living purposefully, because more is caught than is taught. So thank you
Mhm,
both for
mhm.
being my guests on Rethinking Freedom.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I'm too excited. We only have an hour, but I know with that we might have to do a part 2, a part 3, a part 4. So let us start at the very beginning here. What does purpose mean to you? And did you find yours? And if
Mm,
so, how? And I'm going to start
mhm.
with you, Dr. White.
Hmm. Purpose means you have to discover what you're not. And I start that by saying a lot of times, I don't think that we facilitate the right environments for children to begin early on knowing what purpose is and who they are, what they're here to do. I think that we think that that's something that has to happen later on in life. And so I had to find mine because the first part of my life, I feel like I was just going through the motions. I was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but was raised in Mississippi. And that was the greatest blessing that I've ever had, was to be raised in Mississippi. Because Mississippi, you learn early on that you can do hard things, because it's just things are not easy. You understand economic situations in Mississippi, but I'm grateful for the great people that I was raised by. But there are some good and bad things I learned through that experience, and it's all learning. And so I had to find it because I I lived the earlier part of my life in survival mode, and you're not going
Mm.
to be in purpose if you're in survival. You're just trying to make it day to
Oh,
day.
you have to slow down on that
Yeah,
one. You are
yeah,
not going to live in purpose if you're in survival. Wow,
yeah.
what does that mean for so many people? Please go ahead.
It sounds like a good thing sometimes when people say I'm surviving. I get the what they say, meaning that they're trying to make it and they're making it, and that's a big deal to be making it. But we have to do more than just make it. And when you're in survival mode, survival is you don't know if you're gonna make it. And so you got to build some confidence and some competence that we have what it takes and that we can do the hard things. Because if you're in survival mode, it's a luxury for you to stop and think about how you feel. And so the earlier part, I had to tuck a lot of my feelings because it didn't matter about how I felt. It was about duty. It was about hard work. It was about being a female. I had to do for others. I had to just worry about serving. And so those particular traits helped me, but they also hindered me when I matured into the second part of my life. And so what I'm saying is there are things that we get from our families that we definitely need to hold on to. Good people who do right by people, and that's hard and hard. That's getting harder to find. But we also have to recognize what we need to leave behind. And so I would say just what helped me to find my purpose was being very curious, just getting curious, because the day to day didn't always work for me. I tried to out accomplish. I was even embarrassed from coming from Mississippi. I thought I was behind. I thought when I moved to Texas that people would know so much more than me. So it was almost like the hero's journey. I had to go away to try to find who I was, but then when I faced the hard things, I realized that everything I needed, I already had.
See, I told you. It's only going to get better. This is why these are the kind of women I hang around with. These are the kind of women I want to introduce to you, my audience. How about you, Dr. Gardier? And what does purpose mean to you? And have you found yours? How did you find yours?
So, I echo everything that Kiana said earlier. For me, it was, it started out earlier with my own children. I had a childcare center on the East Coast. And so, going through the motions of being an Army wife, I was committed to my own children. And in that commitment, I was empowered to start taking care of other children around me, not just in my immediate circle, in the Army base, but globally. And so my deep commitment to my children actually pushed me into my purpose of serving. But another thing that was really, really, really critical for me on that journey, Dr. White and I talk a lot about you've got to go fast to go slow. But it was just taking the time to discover my why when it comes to my own children, my commitment to my children. And another thing that was really helpful, and I'm very passionate about this, is not standing by or sitting by and allowing society to define what success looked like for me while I was on that journey.
That is, again, so powerful, because people feel like, oh, okay, and I'm not saying that, because people can find their purpose in different ways, but the way that I have known a lot of people to find their purpose is in the doing, is in that curiosity, is in then looking around and you're like, wait a second, I can serve here, I can do this. And I found that purpose is always greater than the self. If you say your purpose is just to acquire just for you to have a good life, I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you, I don't think you've quite found it. I think purpose is found in service. It's found in making a difference. I'm going to read very quickly from a book that I wrote that's called Your Self-Love Revolution. And on a chapter on purpose, I'll just read it. It says, purpose is more than a specific goal. It is the deep and inherent reason for our existence. It's a reflection of our unique gifts, passions, values, and the impact we desire to create in the world. And when I expound on this, I tell people that sometimes you are going to find your purpose, as you were saying, Dr. White, in those hard things. So when I used to do prison ministry, I was okay at it. Some might say I was good at it. But the women in the prison ministry who had the most impact were women who had actually gone through the judicial system on that side as prisoners and understood it at a whole different level than I could just intellectually or talking to people or reading books. And so when they spoke to these women about what gets you there and how you make it out of there with your mind intact, it was a whole different thing. So they could live out a purpose of serving those women in a whole different way than I could because of what they had experienced. As a woman who's gone through infertility and experienced so many miscarriages, I can speak to women in a certain way who are going through that someone else who hasn't experienced that hasn't. So as we're talking about purpose, don't just, again, look for, oh, well, I'm good at singing and dancing, so that must be. It could be some trauma that you went through that has now, or as you were saying, Dr. Gardner, when you're talking about, I started raising my kids, and then I'm like, wait a second, and there are other kids, and then there are other kids. And now look at us, 19 years of public education. And when you're an educator, you have no idea how many seeds you've planted and where they're going to grow and what they're going to produce. That's amazing. So why would you say people struggle to identify their purpose?
I would say because there's no clear route to get to purpose. And so for some people, they may be just born into a culture that facilitates the work of service. I was born into a culture where there were my grandmother is very service oriented. Like, she volunteered in the community. She fed people. She brought people into her home who didn't have a house, but we didn't talk about it in that way. And so again, some of the things that, because we've been conditioned to want something else, that we look outside of our homes and outside of our communities, and we think that we have to earn purpose. And so then I started to try to get these degrees or these accolades and all of that. And then you realize that takes you away from that family that nurtured you. It takes you a little bit away from that. But then you go into this new environment in which you don't fully fit either, because some of the values then don't really align. So you find yourself sometimes, or let me speak for myself, I found myself at a crossroad. And so I think it's hard because, like I said, it's no direct way. So for me, thankful enough that I knew that I was always been a learner, and I've always been a teacher at heart. So the field that I chose to go into for a career just lended itself to service. It lended itself to impact. It lended itself to being better. But when I realized that after all those accolades and all, that was all good when I was getting 99% of kids to, get commended on tests. But when I wanted to go into leadership and I had all these accolades and experiences and evidence of my work, but I started running into some issues with promotion. That's when I realized, I got to dig a little deep because I was hurt and I felt like I was naive. And I had really built my identity based on my work. And so I had to unlearn some of those things. I had built it on academia. I had built it on work. I had built it on validation from people who sometimes I knew more than they knew. And so I had to have my own self-revelation. Before you wrote the book, I had to go through my own, revolution with myself. So I would say that. So just like, that's why I say you have to know who you are and you have to know who you're not. And you go back and forth between that to learn, to unlearn, to relearn. Because like the stories of infidelity that you spoke about in Mississippi, we would not have even spoken about that. So it may have been women in my community who experienced that, but we would know because we hid so much. And so I'm just thankful that, we're open. And so sometimes helping people find their purpose is being open with your story and letting them know I still don't have it figured out. I know the plays, but I still don't have it figured out. I'm still like, it's still a work in progress every day.
Yes. That is so rich. I'm going to put a pin in that because I want to hear from Nicola real quick. But I'm going to put a pin in that in terms of we're still growing, we're still evolving. How about you, Nicola? What are your thoughts on this? Why do you think people struggle so much with?
And see, for me, I think people struggle because they're not embracing their failures and using that as a roadmap or even as a guide to get out of that zone. And so for me, when I went through a divorce, and I wrote about this in my first book, when I went through a divorce, I was left in this country with 2 Black boys in America, no family around. And my job was to raise those 2 young men to be the best versions of themselves, which means I had to show up. Regardless of what I was going through, regardless of the sleepless nights, regardless of the tears, I had to show up every single day, not hide those from the boys because they had to learn how to be resilient, but I also had to protect them to the point where they would not start living in that mindset where all you see is pain. You don't see what comes out from that mango seed that you talked about. So not staying in the place where I felt like I was stuck and couldn't come out of it, I had to redefine my why every single day and make sure that if something wasn't working, being reflective, we don't spend enough time reflecting on our failures because we're so busy, woe is me. Sometimes you've got to stay in that hard spot in order to be refined, in order to dig deep and find truly what matters. And what mattered to me was showing up every single day for my boys, so then they in turn could turn around and start having an impact in society. But growing up in a family in the Caribbean where service was at the core of what we did every single day, we saw hard things. My grandmother was a pastor. And so when they thought we weren't listening to what was going on or what was coming, as issues in the society, we heard it all. And how do you raise above what people say you should be? A single mother with 2 who's sad and lonely no. My children had to see what it looked like to come from a position of power and not just sit back and celebrate. There's times when I had a setback and I had to go say, wait a minute, let me go back to the drawing board. What did not work here? What are the resources I need to pull from? Whether it was internally or whether it's from out there, where do I need to pull from in order to show up every single day, ready to go, ready to grind, and live in my purpose, my truth. It was my truth.
I'm grateful that I can go back and listen to this again and take notes and really sit with what you all are saying, because there's so much that you're saying that is resonating with me. And as you were talking and Dr. White, you also touched on this a little bit, is just the challenges that come with finding purpose, the challenges that come with living in a society that may see us in a certain way. And so for people who are watching this, just depending on whether you're male, you're female, whether you're older or younger, whether you have access to resources or you don't have access to resources, maybe you've dealt with a different kind of trauma, you might be hearing this all through different lenses. But the issue is that there are societal expectations, there are societal pressures, there are challenges that come with finding purpose. I know you started to touch on this a little bit, but for someone who's out there just really like, oh my God, I don't know, I just feel stuck. Can you go a little bit more into your process if you had one?
I did. I had to go. First of all, I was an English teacher. And so with being an English teacher, you have to teach the story. You have to teach the plot. You have to teach about major characters. And in writing, you have to teach people how to unpack their story, because every year you start with like the personal narrative. And it's a great way to connect, to show we're more alike than we are different. But through that work, I started having some ahas. And I said, you know what? A major character becomes a major character by how they address the conflicts in real life. And so in my attempt to try to make relevance to students from the literature that we were reading, I had to make sure that I first unpacked my own story when I was crafting my model for them as they crafted their models. And I told them that a lot of the stories that we read in literature, it goes back to adults writing about their childhoods, because childhoods are very interesting times. We actually we have this nostalgia for those good times or bad times. They're when we start to learn our lessons and all. So I would say unpacking your life story to just try to better understand how your beliefs, your values, how did they come to be? And then unpack your experience to see how have those beliefs changed? How have you adapted those situations? So that would be one way. I would say that's a real powerful way. You got to do the work. Everybody has to do the work, because I often say this: good kids from good families, they still have to heal too. They still have to do the work.
I tell people, we talk about functional and dysfunctional families. And I said, in my 53 years, I have not seen a functional family yet.
Absolutely.
Every family I know, I don't care how shiny it is, there's something there. If you look, that it's this, because we're human beings, because no one is perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. We're all flawed in some way, shape, or form. How about you, Nicola? What are your thoughts on that question? Just looking at the challenges and how you have been able to.
I think for me really is one, once I redefined what that purpose was and how I need, the things I needed to do to work towards it and to be successful, you also need to find a circle of influence, people, any type of distraction. Because a lot of times when we start, feeling doubtful, this is when someone is telling you, well, maybe you should not even try to do that. Maybe you should focus over here. Limit the distractions in your life, because this is your purpose. This is your journey. What that outcome needs to be. Another thing that we need to start looking at is, some of us are staying in a place of inactivity. We've got to move. For anything to take place, you've got to get out of that place of inactivity and start working towards movement. Because nothing happens when you're sitting there waiting for someone to show up. You have to show up for your own self every single day, and start using some of these failures that you experience. Some of these failures and some of these setbacks, use that to propel you. Like, I get turned all the way up when something doesn't work out, because now I need to go back and figure out. I'm like, what's up? Let's go. I'm not going to just sit there. I'm not going to sit in it. I've got to keep moving. I've got to keep moving. And I have to keep just kind of have that roadmap. And if I veer off of it, I better find a way to get back on it. So again, listening to feedback, but surrounding yourself with people that's going to pour into you, not suck it out. That's critical.
Mm, mm.
Because
And
oftentimes I'm
yeah.
sorry,
No,
you
please
find
go
out
ahead.
your purpose. You find out your purpose because usually somebody else sees it in you, and so that's also important for you. Once you're further along on that journey, is to go back and make sure that you're seeing it inside someone else, because people have always poured into me. People have always saw something in me that I didn't always see in myself. So that's critical. And so when Nicola was saying you got to find your people, you got to find your network and your tribe, you people will be attracted to you. You'll get aligned with the right people. So you brought your children to my school, never knowing that we would continue the relationship. I met
Yes.
Nicola through you, and Nicola and I talk to Nicola probably more than I talk to my own husband now. So, and I don't know if that's functional or dysfunctional, but I'm just saying, so just even being associated with the right people is going to associate you with even more people. And you're going to have what you need if you stay open to it. Because I used to have this mentality, no new friends. But
Mm.
now that worked to get me to a certain spot, but that's not going to be what it takes to get me to some other levels, because there's nobody in my family that's necessarily at the levels that I'm trying to go to.
That
So
is
that's a
that
very
is
limited thinking.
that is so important. That's one of the reasons that I'm so grateful. From childhood, my parents exposed me to books. And I remember being 5 years old and asking a question, and we had three different sets of encyclopedias, but we had one that was called Childcraft. So for younger folk, this was before computers, and well, not they were computers, but they were huge computers in government places and in major organizations, not in people's homes. We didn't have Google, all of that. We actually had books that you had to go through. So my parents, I would ask a question and they'll say, go look it up. And with the Childcraft encyclopedias, it
Mhm,
was alphabetized. So if you were looking up apples, then you go to the one with A, and then you scroll through until you find A for apples, and then you read about it. And then you end up reading more than just about apples, because you read the next thing under apples, and maybe it's asparagus, and so on and so forth. But I also got into reading a lot of books about different people, places I'd never been. Um,
mhm,
Reading
mhm,
about iced tea, and we didn't drink iced tea in Nigeria where I grew up. And I was like, well, what could iced tea possibly be? And so I made hot tea and then I put ice in it. So when I moved back to America and I was working at a restaurant and they were like, make the iced tea, and then they give you the directions to make the iced tea. I was like, I knew that, but it was funny, but it was just that curiosity, that being open. And so I say that to say that sometimes your mentors or the people that encourage you might be right in front of your face. They might be your teachers. There might be someone in your whatever your spiritual house of worship or whatever it is. It might be in your family. Sometimes it could also be in books, in
mhm,
characters that you're reading about. And I'm going to share about a lady later on who definitely has impacted my life. But something that you said earlier too, Dr. White, you were talking about the personal narrative and being an English teacher, and that's where you start with the kids. And I was thinking, you don't have to be in school.
mm-mm,
Continue to do your personal narratives. We
mhm,
call it journaling.
mhm,
Just taking time
mhm,
out daily,
Mhm.
multiple times a week to sit down and
mhm,
reflect. And Dr. Gardner, you talked
mhm,
about reflect, reflect, reflect. And we live in this world now where people can't even stand to have any quiet. You come into the house, you immediately turn something that makes noise on. And
mhm,
we're constantly distracted. And what that does is it takes us away from really being able to examine our lives. What is that quote?
mhm,
The unexamined life is a life
Mhm.
not worth living, something
mhm,
along those lines. And so to find purpose and
mhm,
then to live out the purpose, I really do believe requires that self-reflection. Part of that reflection that I've noticed is not just reflecting on my personal skills, gifts, talents, all of that. Like I mentioned, it's reflecting on the challenges,
mhm,
it's reflecting on, yes, my accomplishments. I also think that for some of
Mhm.
us, it's worth reflecting on the families we come from
mhm,
and whether there's certain um, gifts that flow through the family. Do either
mhm.
one of you want to touch on that in
Mhm.
any way? We don't have to, but I'm just wondering, does anyone want to touch on that in any way?
Well, I know that my mom has a strong
Yeah, I'll touch
spirit
on
and
that a little bit.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I
I
think there's a
think there
little
was
bit
a
of a
lag, so we
yeah, there's a
started
little bit of
talking
a
at the
lag.
same.
So go ahead. Go ahead, Nicola, and then we'll come back to Kiana. Go ahead.
Okay. So for me, growing up in a family where, my grandmother, I say this all the time, she's 104 years old. So sitting at her feet every single day, I was that one grandchild that followed her to every convention on that island. I was gone sometimes for an entire week. And I was able to watch her plow through situations that other families were dealing with. And then I asked her one, I said, well, Grandma, how do you sit there and listen to all of these problems from these people and at home? And she said, I never lose sight of my anchor, which is the purpose and the commitment I have to my own family at home. So regardless of what I'm picking up from these people when we're on the road, and I was hearing and seeing it, I was an inquisitive child. I was very, and I'm seeing that in my own granddaughter now. So just listening to some of these stories, and I'm like, how do you not carry that every day and be stressed out behind it? She said, I know where my anchor is, and I'm committed to this family. And when I start going off track and when I start getting distracted, I know how to pull it back. But just watching her serve people every single day, I knew growing up that my goal and my purpose in life was to pour into people with everything I have, but I had to start that at home. So the same way my grandma started it at home and I did the same thing, now I'm starting to see that legacy in my granddaughter, because now she wants to go out and she want to impact lives and she want to change lives. But for me, it was what was going on in the home. And the one thing my grandma always told us, don't let failure or setback derail your plans or your purpose in life. You're bigger than that. You're greater than that. You can do hard things because I show you what it looks like to come out of hard things. And so, with that in mind, I mean, I pressed through whatever the situation was. But again, my whole family, we learned this during COVID. We're all in positions where we're serving others because all of us had to still go to work,
So
because we were
there's a
serving people.
trend.
And that's when my sister said, yes. And my sister said, do you realize that we're all in the business of serving because of the seed that my grandmother planted, but because we all had to define that from where we are and where our families are, because it looked different how we serve. I like to serve on a global scale because growing up, it was always a bigger picture for me. Whereas, I may have my sister serving just in the community, but again, our children are now starting to behave the way we are seeing life and living out our purpose.
That's fantastic. How about you, Dr. White?
I would say my family, like my grandmother and my mom, they have a strong gut. And so that teaching you to even trust your gut, I think is something very powerful to pass down, because a lot of that gut is from patterns too. And so whenever something comes up that doesn't feel right, it's a pattern that we have to pay attention to. So I think that that's also a way for us to reflect and learn and unlearn, is paying attention to patterns and understanding when the patterns change. We can't stay in any one way. We need to change some things too. So I would say that, but I'm the complete opposite of my mom. And so I do think that that's okay. But what I'm thankful for is that she gave me a foundation and she never tried to dim my light. And so I would say that just because people may go out to live out their lives in different ways, be careful when you're interacting with others that you're not comparing and you're not dimming lights. And so I'm thankful that even with being a teenage mom, they never dimmed my light. They said it's not that they condoned it, but they didn't want me in the corner with my head down, because they know that was not any good for a baby either. But what they said was, we got a baby to raise. And it helped me keep my dignity. They helped me keep my, they just didn't dim my light. So it was a lot of opportunities, right, that they could have made me pay.
So what you're saying is you were a teenage mom,
Yeah.
unmarried mom, and today you are all of the things that I just described you as being. So for someone watching this who thinks, well, no, that path is no longer for me. I made a choice and therefore this is my life is done. You are living proof that that is not the fact.
But you
Thank
need
you
the
for that.
village. You still need the village.
Mhm.
Yeah. You
Because
need the
they could
village.
have dimmed my light, is what I'm saying. Because I was
Mhm.
as good as the village around me to help me to be where I am today. So although they didn't go out and do the other things that we, you know, we talk about on TV, they were foundational and pivotal for me to become who I am today. I would not have been able to do it without their support.
So in having this conversation, it's not just anyone watching, just thinking about, okay, my own purpose and making sure I find mine and I'm living mine, which is extremely important. It's also how do we create an environment that allows other people to find their purpose and to live it out. And as a mother of 5 children, all of those 5 children are so different. There's not a one size fits all in parenting them. And I'm constantly like, okay, well, yeah, we got this far with this one. And well, but this one is showing up different. And how do I hold space for them? How do I honor who they are? And something you just said about dimming the light and comparing. One of the things that I've seen, young people, adults, older people, every age group, this idea of comparing. Because when you start comparing yourself to someone else, a couple of things can happen. One is you get a big head because you're like, ooh, I'm all of that and all of that. You lose your humanity, your empathy, and you lose a sense of who you are. And you might become a cruel person to other folk. And actually lose out on some of your blessings because now you can't receive from anybody because you think you are everything. So that false pride. But then the other part is you're comparing yourself to people and then you are feeling like you came up short. And so you're going, well, of course they're this because they have X, Y, and Z and so on. I can't do that. And you're putting limitations on yourself. You're thinking of yourself as less than. And either one of those paths will prevent you from truly seeing, being able to find, being able to be open for your purpose to find you. Because sometimes your purpose finds you. So I know that I've always loved to teach, although I've never been a teacher in the traditional sense of the word, like employed as a teacher, but I've taught since I was 5 years old, and my parents gave me a little chalkboard, and I would gather all the kids who were younger than me, and even some who were older than me. And like I read something, I'm going to share it with y'all. We're all learning our alphabets today. But I remember even with this show, when Babatunde, I thought he was asking me to be a guest on a show in his stead, right? So I was driving, he called me, and that's what I heard is, I committed to being a guest on a show. I can't do it. Will you, stand in for me? And I'm like, sure, yeah, I can do that. So he said, I'm going to text you the number of who to call so you guys can set up a time that works for your schedule. And I was like, cool. So I did that. And then as I'm talking to the radio station manager, he says, well, so what day of the week would you want your show to come on? I said, excuse me? No, when does the host, whatever their show is, what time is it? When do they need me? And I can figure out how to fit it into my schedule. And we realized quickly that we were not on the same page. I said, what are you talking about? He said, no, you're supposed to be starting a radio show. And I said, no, sir. That was not my conversation with Babatunde. That is nothing that is on my play card. I've never thought about it, have no aspirations for it, not gonna do it. And Ron Grace had the wisdom to say, well, before you say no, can you just think about it and let's come back and have this conversation again? So I called Babatunde and I was like, I thought you were talking about this. What are you talking about? And he talked me into, he was like, why wouldn't you? But I did not see this as part of what I was supposed to be doing. So as you talk about growing and evolving and being open, once I opened myself up to the possibility, I said, well, this is just another platform to do what I've always done, which is try to educate, which is try to empower, which is try to coach people. So why not embrace this? And we'll see where it goes. But Hey, these are the risks. So before I ask you another question, I do want to share very quickly about a lady that some of you may know of and some of you may have never heard of her, in which case you want to go find out about her. When we talk about living your purpose and how that changes the world, this is a lady, Ida Barnett Wells. This is a book called Ida, A Sword Among Lions, written by Paula J. Giddens, who also wrote When and Where I Enter. And if you don't know who this woman is, she was a journalist, a suffragist, a civil rights advocate. She lived her life on purpose with courage and conviction. At a time when Black men were being lynched, Black women as well, and most people were cowering in fear of being lynched if they speak up, Ida B. Wells, who lost her parents at age 16 and raised her siblings, said, no, I am going to take a stand. Her own friends were lynched in Memphis, and she said, that's it. And she wrote the Red Record. She had a newspaper called Free Speech. She went around the country boldly using her pen and her voice to fight for truth and justice, and helping to lay the foundation for modern civil rights movement. Now, I always like to be able to point people, hopefully, to resources that even children can use. And this is one. As you can see, it's more geared towards children, and it's called Ida B. Wells, Mother of the Civil Rights Movement, by Dennis Brindle Fradin and Judith Bloom Fradin. And I just encourage people, again, my love of books, the ability to use books to understand what other people have done, to understand that people have experienced things that you're experiencing and worse, and they found a way to come out of it and to live their lives on purpose. That's what a lot of times keeps me motivated, keeps me excited about waking up every day, no matter what my life looks like. So I just wanted to share that story. And for you to understand that with Ida B. Wells, with the two guests that we have today, these women did not sit around and just intellectualize their purpose. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just, okay, well, I hope, somebody drops, whatever, like gives it everything to me in writing and it's one and done. They actually discovered that purpose through action. So Nicole, I believe you were the one who was saying, don't just be stagnant, keep moving, just go out and do and do and do, and don't be afraid of those failures. Reflect. It's not failure if you learn from it. That's how I feel about it. None of my experiences are failures because I choose to learn from them. So anything else that you would like to share? We'll start with you, Dr. White.
I would say there's this push right now to be the most interesting person in the room. And I would just urge people to move to being the most interested person in the room, where you get curious about other people and other things. Because I know we're in this space where it's about, social media and memes and pictures and tweets and all of that. So if we can just take a step back and just be so interested. And through that interest, I think more people will be in purpose because they'll be thinking about who they are and what they really want to do. And then they'll foster the community for other people to do the same.
Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Dr. Gadare?
One of the things I would like to say, just having a clear sense of purpose kind of keeps me grounded. But one of the things, I approach everything with a different degree of confidence, because one of the things, I don't want to be locked into anyone's box. So I want to have like a clear mind. I want to be liberated from any single judgment that other people have of me, because I just want to live at my own true, authentic self. But a lot of times the way you start thinking, oh, well, someone's going to see it this way, or they're going to judge me and they're going to do this. I'm all about freedom. I'm all about liberation. And not that I don't care what they think or what they say, but I don't let society define my success or how I think when it comes to getting what I need in my purpose.
Right.
Again, just I would say blown away, but I'm and I can't ever get used to it. But every time I talk with both of you, it's just the depth of wisdom and how deeply you've thought about things, and your clarity in which you share it always just like takes my breath away momentarily, and it's like, okay, I need to sit with that because I'm constantly learning and growing. As again, as we keep talking about purpose and and evolution, in my interactions with quite a few of my coaching clients at this time, I'm hearing a lot of people just feeling despair,
Mhm.
feeling very burdened about the political times that we live
Mhm.
in, feeling
Mhm.
like, well, it doesn't matter what I do, you know,
Mhm.
society is bent in a certain way. Does it even matter? And when I hear people my age feeling that way, it really concerns me how young people are then feeling. Are they feeling optimistic about their future? What messages are we giving them? Because when people don't have purpose, it's easier. It's like being a leaf in the wind. You just get blown whichever way the wind is blowing, and you may land in a good place or you may land somewhere you don't want to be. And being an attorney as well, I'm seeing so many of our young people and others who are just caught up in this whole thing that is not conducive for their health, their wealth, their well-being, their safety. But there's a sense of despair of just I don't know what my purpose is. There's a book that I read a while back, and I keep going back to it. It's by Viktor E. Frankl, and it's called Man's Search for Meaning. And he actually was a prisoner in a concentration camp, a Jewish you know what I'm trying to say, can get it out, concentration camp. And he talked about what allowed some people to survive through hell and still keep their minds intact, and how so many other people gave up hope, and once that hope was gone, everything else was gone.
Mhm.
The reason it's so important to me that people find and hold on to their meaning, their purpose, is that that purpose becomes a compass for your entire life.
Mhm.
Like there's certain things you can call me and say, "Oh, Aya, you could make $1 million doing this," and so
Mhm.
on and so forth. And all I
Mhm.
have to do is check that against my purpose, and I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, that sounds great. I could use $1 million, but I
Mhm.
can't do that because that's going to take
Mhm.
me away from purpose. So it becomes a compass that guides all my choices. Um, but even in saying that,
Mhm.
understanding, go back to that mango seed, that a mango plant in month 2 looks very different than in the second year, looks very different in its 40th year. And that being open is about allowing yourself to grow and evolve. And for me, one of the critical parts of living on purpose is also having faith. It's that connectivity to God, it's that
Mhm.
connectivity to that divine
Mhm.
essence, if you will, spirit, whatever you want to call God. So,
Mhm.
what are your last few comments, if you will, with our audience and our young people about finding and living their purpose? We'll start with you, Dr. White.
I would say make sure you have a vision for yourself for where you want to be. Don't think about any kind of limits. Just get it down and get it down on paper. And sometimes you have to, what we call in design
Mhm.
thinking, you have to hack something. That means you do a little bit toward that. So you may not be at a place where you can do everything that you want to do. You may not be in a situation, but do something. Like Nicola said, keep moving. Surround yourself with good things, good people.
Mhm.
Pay attention to, don't miss the message when people are trying to give you feedback. Don't take it personal, but take it personally to get
Mm,
better.
mm,
Every moment is trying to teach us something. And so just ask yourself, what is this moment trying to teach me? And I think if you have that curiosity, and you have to be rooted
Mhm.
in something bigger than yourself, because we're not enough. We're not. And so for people who are unable to sustain their purpose, it's got to be bigger. It's got to be
mm,
a bigger purpose.
mm. Thank you for that. How about you, Miss Nicola, Dr. Nicola Gardere? How about you?
I want to say, just really know how to set goals and how to revisit them.
Mm.
Because when you're working towards your purpose, you have to be, what steps do I need to take to get there? And if these things are not working, don't look at it as failure and be hard on yourself. Step back, take a step back and say, let me look at the big picture. Don't lose sight of the reason why you started in the first place. Just keep going, no matter what the situation is. Sometimes you got to pivot, but that doesn't mean, pivot does not mean you're planted there. You're just taking a pause. And sometimes it's okay to do that because now you're in a reflective state to think about, how did I get here? But again, I would say keep moving, regardless of what you have to do in life. Keep moving. Surround yourself with people that's going to pour into you. And Kiana is right. We talk about everything. If it's a situation at work, okay, let's talk through this, but not lose sight of you and what's on the inside of you. We all have talents that we're bringing to the table that's going to, it is staying true to myself, staying true to my purpose, know what motivates me, know what excites me, and don't get locked into the box because somebody said this or someone lived the other way. I'm all about liberation, I'm all about freedom, but you will not deter my journey because I know what I'm after.
Mhm.
That is so powerful. So there's a question that I always ask all my guests because this show is about rethinking freedom. You know, as we talk about freedom, it occurs to me, always occurs to me when I'm putting together a show, is because there's free in freedom. I think we sometimes think freedom is supposed to be free.
Hmm.
But freedom is not free. Finding your purpose, doing the work, whatever it is you want to achieve, there is some sacrifice that is involved. There
Mhm.
is something you have to bring and bring to the table. It doesn't just fall from the sky, the proverbial sky. So for each of you,
Mhm.
what is your definition of freedom? How do you see freedom? And we'll start with you, Nicola.
Okay, so how do I see freedom? There was a lag, so I missed the first part of that.
Yes. How do you see freedom? How would you define freedom? What would freedom look like for you?
I think for me, freedom looks like, regardless of what the external pressures are that's going on around me while I'm on this journey to discover and live out my true purpose, regardless of what that is, I have something on the inside of me that is just going to keep pushing. Regardless of what you think, your judgment of me does not define me. So I have the freedom within my own self to not let your thoughts or your negative influences come into me and disrupt my peace. So for me, freedom is knowing how to push it back and stay true to what I'm about.
Mhm.
That is powerful and very difficult for most of us to do, which is why people come around us, their energy shift, how we show up, and so on and so forth. Yes, that is very powerful. How about you, Dr. White?
I would say it's conscious decision making, understanding that we get a choice in a lot of things. Sometimes we think we don't have a choice, but we actually do. And so standing up for ourselves. And it doesn't mean fighting everything. Sometimes, what people are saying to us, we need to sit in that. Sometimes it's an ouch, right? We can't avoid everything, but it's conscious decision making.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So we get to have another day. We get to change the direction. We get to rewrite our narratives. So I think that that's freeing. There are some situations that, we were born into, or we may be in a community, but we may not be able to afford to just move to another country. And also, I mean, I get that too, but we get to consciously decide how we're going to live within the constraints or opportunities that we have.
Absolutely. I want to thank you both for this time with
Mhm.
me and for sharing and giving us so much to think about. Hopefully, those of you who have young people, you can bring them around and have this conversation and continue the conversation even beyond this. I want to very quickly evoke Nikki Giovanni, who I think in so many ways lived her purpose and changed the world in
Mm.
the process, and just
Mhm.
honor her as she makes her transition, as she has made her
Mhm.
transition to the next life or where
Mhm.
whatever comes later. Thank you all for watching. Please like, please subscribe, please share. Thank you.